Each week, we welcome to our NfG stage one of our highly talented members or special guests with something designed to help you and your business. Our next guest has moved from Bradford to Bath to Bristol and beyond, before settling back in Blighty, in her home county of Yorkshire. Through a wonderful Spanish teacher, Mrs. Henderson, and a trip to Sevilla for her 17th birthday, she found a passion for linguistics, which saw her choose a career as a language teacher for over 20 years. Wanting to enable traveling the world far beyond the classroom walls, in January 2020, she began a new adventure. With her husband, Tim, she bought a franchise and within 2 months saw her whole industry turned upside down and collapse, both with enforced global lockdowns, costly quarantines, and with strict testing and vaccination measures. Not only did every high footfall destination see less traffic, but many travel associated businesses had to either pivot or die, with countless people in the tourism industry turning to alternative careers, causing the world of travel as we know it to change in ways never dreamed of. But without a magical crystal ball, yet determined to hang in there, this dynamic duo pressed ahead, knowing that travel would have to somehow spring back, with many people soon determined to take those bucket list trips that may otherwise they've never had a chance to do so. But in such a chaotic world, knowing who to rely on became a gamble, and even arranging a simple trip to the Far East was like a showdown in the Wild West, without having a guardian angel or perhaps a fairy godmother to look out for you. In fact, she's been so good at providing the right advice and making wishes come true that the dream team, or should I call it the dream making team, have quickly found themselves in the top 10 NJT franchises in the country, and here to help us find our footing in the ever-changing world of travel. We welcome our very own fairy godmother, Alison Cooper. Good morning, Alison.
Thank you. Goodness me. So where on earth did you hear about Mrs. Henderson? I'm amazed at that. She was my hero, my inspiration. So let me see if I can share screen. So basically, yes, it has been not exactly the business we would have expected or hoped to have, but we're going in the right direction now. So yeah, I love that graphic, don't you? And it's all meant to be about us holding your hand through the changing world of travel that we're in. So my husband's phone is here and not on mute, sorry. So yes, literally we threw all our savings, having been teachers, we threw our savings into the franchise back in late 2019. I did my training in January 2020, Tim did his in March, and we actually started trading mid-Jan, and then this funny news about a virus in China started to trickle through. Little did we know. So before COVID, there were other issues, of course. About a week after we started trading, there was a thing called a Kalima, a sandstorm, where literally lots of people got to the Canaries and they were being diverted and big problems. And I can't take the credit for this, but the sort of thing that good travel businesses do is work in the background, sort things out, so that literally if there's a problem and you can't do what you're meant to be doing, it's all been sorted in the background. And you know, that's what we do, just run around in the background being a travel fairy godmother. So yeah, literally what happened to travelers as lockdown approached, there you can see an airport looking quite calm, but certainly they weren't as things unraveled. One of the things that we always want to point out, whether people want to use us or anybody else, just be very careful if you do travel DIY. It can be cheaper, but it can also be disastrous. So people who were abroad as lockdown was coming, they often just found themselves queuing in airports. They were on hold with call centres of airlines and with larger corporate travel suppliers. And some of those travel agencies closed, didn't they? And so then it was really tricky for people. Some people had to pay huge amounts to get a flight home. There was panic buying going on and profiteering, I would say, in some ways. People were sleeping in the airport, and getting hold of information was the biggest cause for concern. I had friends who booked a cruise and separate flights, and they ended up with vouchers because that was for the airline, because Ryanair would not refund them. They're not exactly known for doing so. And other friends had booked separate hotel and flights and just to save a few pounds, but the money literally was tied up for a year because it was all just kept in credit notes and they didn't manage to get refunds, which you should be able to do. Our former mentors' parents, they were out in Australia as lockdown approached. They were in their little holiday bubble. They weren't aware of what was going on in the world. And the daughter literally got them on one of the last flights out and said, "You're coming back." Because otherwise, God knows how long it would have been till she'd seen them. And then, yeah, about 2 years ago, there was a UK plane flying to Vegas and the captain announced mid-Atlantic, "We're going to have to land in Philadelphia and you'll have to transfer and go get another plane." So literally on arriving, all the passengers except for 2 had to form a big queue to check in. But the lucky not just travel passengers had a text from their agents who, along with the suppliers, had been working in the background sorting it out. And they literally had the boarding passes there ready to hand and they could just go off to the bar and chill, which is how we all like to start our holidays, I would imagine. So how to avoid such issues? So you could use, clearly, people like me, people like Joe from the group as well, whose personal numbers you get. You don't have to be then going through call centre queues and having to contend with retail opening hours, because we work around you. We work evenings, weekends, whenever suits you. And Simon Calder even said recently, travellers should book with real live travel agents, which is great for him to say. So ABTA and ATOL are very, very important in the world of travel, but I don't think many people know what they mean. So ATOL is there in case an airline goes bust. It will process refunds and it will make sure people get back home. ABTA is a regulatory body of travel agents and it makes sure that the money is held in bond in case of a travel company going bust, like when Thomas Cook went bust and passengers are stuck away from home, so ABTA would fund their return and get them back. And scarily, there are some quite well-known travel agents that you see doing lots of advertising, do very pretty promotional stuff, but they're not even in ABTA, and that's companies like Love Holidays and On the Beach. And that is why they're cheap, because there is a small cost to packaging everything together, like an insurance policy. So just be cautious of that if you hear of a bargain, because it isn't always a bargain if things need to change and you want to get hold of them. So good agents enforce something called PTR, Package Travel Regulations. And they came about in 2018 and they are to protect the customers, travel customers and their rights. So basically, if I were in a face-to-face, I would often get, say, a model building to illustrate a hotel or other accommodation, a little plane and a car, and then wrap them together with bubble wrap to symbolize wrapping a protective blanket around them to group them together as one legal entity. And then the idea is that if any part of the package falls through, the whole package can be cancelled and the customer has the choice of a rebooking, an add-to-back credit note or a full refund. And back at the start of lockdown, an awful lot of companies did go down the route of the credit notes because of their cash flow. But these days, if things happen and we can't make the holiday happen that people have booked, then we literally just try and get the refund or we move the booking on, because credit notes are a bit of a pain, I think. So positives of using a personal travel consultant. So thankfully, the weird old travel traffic lights have improved. That was a bit of a nightmare to negotiate even for us, and we were working in it. We do advise people on passports. I got a message last night from somebody going, "Your literature says I need 6 months at the end of my trip. I'm a few days short. What should I do?" And I just messaged back and said, "You need to renew it. They'll add those days on, don't worry." You know, just follow the rules. Entry regulations by country. We do get clients who get utterly flummoxed by the online forms, and certainly they're not easy for us either, but we've done them more often than others. So Tim negotiated a special visa for some clients whose son lives in Sydney. They are there right now meeting the little grandchild, and it was quite a faffy job, but he's really proud he managed to do it. And technically we're not meant to be doing visas for people, but I think they really appreciate it when we do. I did a Cape Verde entry form for a lady last week. I think the problem was the form was so bad. One bit came up in French instead of English, and another bit came up in Spanish, but thankfully my language skills came in and we figured our way through it. And then the USA, that can be a minefield. There are people who are trying to get you to pay for help to get the forms filled in to go to America. You shouldn't be needing to do that. If ever you see anything where they're wanting money for you to do those things, don't. You're on the wrong website. France is also one of the most awkward countries to travel to, sadly. In the last 2 years, they're constantly changing things, and things like teenagers accessing restaurants and so on, having to show a pass. It's quite fiddly. And transiting can mean sometimes that a PCR is needed. So even if you don't necessarily need tests to come back from most countries, if you are vaccinated, if you're going through Dubai, you probably do. And even some airlines make up their own rules, and they just say if you're going on our plane, you've got to have a test. So they're the sort of things that we keep on top of. So I had a case study, beautiful couple who are booked to go to Bali. Then it became a Sorrento trip because they both got, because Bali wasn't going to be open in time. And the supplier was trying to push us down the refund credit note. And I thought, no, I just want the money back for the client so they can choose exactly what they want and not be tied to you. So I got that. We booked Sorrento. Then they both got COVID. Then they were waiting to get the travel pass app on their phone, and they were worried they wouldn't get it in time to go. So we then had to get another flight and shorten the honeymoon. So they managed to do the last week of this changed honeymoon, but they were very, very grateful and did us a lovely Trustpilot review, which is on our website. So those sort of things are brilliant for us. And all of that we do free of charge in the background if needed. And 2 people asked me yesterday when we'd done some research for holidays for them, oh, by the way, what's your fee for this? And I said, no, maybe it's the word consultant, but there's no fee at all to the client. We get commission from suppliers. So yeah, now there's a bit of a contentious one in America, of course. If there are people in the group that are not vaccinated, I apologize, because that's probably going to really get you back up. But I'm afraid we have to be realistic, and there are some parts of the world where that's how they feel. So literally, advice: if you're unvaccinated, you can still travel, and there's a whole list of countries there that you can go to without needing to quarantine on arrival. Now, these things can change daily, of course, so, we'd really keep an eye on it if we have clients going who are unvaccinated. Now, of course, you may be allowed in, but then the hotels and restaurants and other attractions may not be quite as welcoming. So it's sort of something to negotiate when you're there and be aware of. And whilst from the 11th of February, vaccinated adults no longer need to take a COVID test or quarantine, which is brilliant because it's cheaper for everyone. And it was a barrier to travel. If you don't qualify as fully vaccinated for travel to England, so if you don't, you will need to show a proof of a negative COVID-19 test taken in the 2 days before you travel back, and you need to book a COVID test to be taken after you arrive. But they are at least a lot cheaper than they used to be. At least, though, you won't need to quarantine unless the result is positive, it's all going in the right direction. So just a word of caution for if people are wanting to book when they're unvaccinated. What do you do if the rules change and you can no longer travel because of being unvaccinated and the country may be changing their stance on it? It's just a cautionary tale, really. Don't assume that you will be entitled to a refund, rebooking or amendment, because this can be outside the control of the supplier. So their standard terms and conditions could apply, meaning that you could lose money, and travel insurance might not cover this either. So I just say, if you're not vaccinated, just be very, very cautious. Suppliers have been extremely flexible, but down the line, I would imagine that they will become less so, because it's very, very expensive for them to constantly be making amendments and changes. And some people have got in the habit of saying, oh yeah, I want to change it, and not particularly having a valid reason. So with vaccinated travellers, the NHS app is very useful. Some people don't like using things on their phone, or they don't have a smartphone, so then obviously we can get things printed out for them. Most countries deem that if it's more than 270 days since your second jab, that you need proof of a booster. And Italy applies that rule after 180 days. So if you know anyone going to Italy, that's worth them checking. Children 12 to 17 can be an issue, and have been since about Christmas time, because many of them were only partially vaccinated. And I know this because we've got a 14-year-old, or they might be unvaccinated. So in many cases, they can enter with taking a test, but in other places, they're just not allowed in if they're not vaccinated. So it's really important to think about these things ahead of making any bookings. And sometimes tests have to be done by a clinician or by a video call. So that small print is very, very important. So why book with us? So we actually do save you a lot of time and stress, and there's no extra cost. And we, like other companies as well, I would hope, are helping people, giving people the chance to mitigate the carbon footprint, because we've partnered up with a charity called Mossy Earth. So the things that we're doing, hope a little bit of a plug here, but I don't mind because it's for the environment. Reforestation, that we've planted about 10,000 trees, I think, big numbers. Sea otters in California, good for the underwater forests, cute, aren't they? There's a sea kelp meadow and kelp forest restoration project in Portugal. Really lock up the carbon there. It's amazing. Oh, I want to dive into that water. There's a project on termite mounds in West Africa to hold back desertification. And then there's lots of pond projects in the UK which remove carbon from the atmosphere, store it in the soil, provide drinking water for wildlife, and of course can help prevent floods. So if you do want to travel, please let us or Joe have a look at it for you. People are booking and they are traveling now. There's no fee for our service. As I say, we get paid commission by suppliers. The frustrating thing is it's after travel. So come Easter, the rounds will be on me. But till then, cash flow is not good. So yeah, in 2020, as Richard said, we didn't have the year we expected. We only sold 56 grand of holidays, and that was a lot of host seasons and last minute jet twos. By December 21, we were at 500,000. June onwards, we really ramped up. And in January, this January, we made 26 bookings at a value of £105,000. We were so happy. And that put us in the top 10 of our franchisees, and also in the top 10 supporters of Mossy Earth. So maybe there is a connection there. So thanks so much to Networking for Good and other networks for giving us a platform for reaching new clients, because we would have never had clients all around the country had it not been for COVID. So in that sense, it will have done us a favour, we think, in the long run. And if anybody does want a holiday and book one by the end of Feb that's 5k or more, we'll throw in lounge passes for the departure lounge. So I hope that's been useful. I will stop sharing. So there we go.